And we are going to get started. I know people are still jumping on, and so perfectly fine. What we'll do, again, just kind of reviewing today. Sorry, one of my dogs wants in. I'll be right back. All right, sorry. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about all things transition, from sending the URF and what that triggers and what process that starts, to completing the transition plan, and then also looking at the transition conference, and then Q&A. I also want to go over the prior written notice, make sure we're checking the correct boxes that we need to be for the different meetings. And then at 1 o'clock, Leslie and Juanita from DeSoto School District are going to pop on just so they can share a Part B perspective about the process, kind of what happens on their end. And then we'll open it up for possible Q&A for them as a Part B program, not specifically as DeSoto. So they kind of know that as well. Every time someone jumps on and the bell goes ding dong, I'm getting positive reinforcement and I'm feeling really good about myself. Like, I kind of feel popular today. I'm not going to lie, guys. I'm not going to lie. Jana's shaking her head at me. Okay, so that all being said, I think the first thing that I'm going to pop up and show you guys is the URF template. And all of these templates, truthfully, are in your Q Drive templates folder. A couple of them, the blank prior written notice and this blank URF document, are in your miscellaneous folder. The transition plan template, transition conference template, those are in your FSC cheat sheets folder. So we're going to just kind of start here with the process of sending the URF. And this is for most of our families, generally, this is really what triggers the process and starting that transition. And this particular document it's a state document. So all infant toddler programs across the state of Kansas use this form. Now, we use the one generated on the database. That's how Tracy formats them. But we also have a Word document just in case. Always need a just in case document. So most of this information, including the referral date, the school district, obviously the Part B referral name, that all gets imported, as well as the child's demographics down here. This goes to the district, and basically what this means is there is a child that's receiving Part C services that may be eligible for Part B services. Once the district gets this document, they are required by law to then see that process through on the Part B end until a family declines an evaluation with Part B, or until the child is evaluated and found not eligible, or evaluated and found eligible. So once Part B gets this document, which is what Tracy sends about 6 months before the child turns 3, CCs you guys, this gets the wheels turning. And what Part B is required to do once they get this document is they're required to send the family notification that they received their information. That way the family is aware that Part B has it, and they have a specific timeline that they have to send the family information. So again, this gets the wheels turning. The information that's on here pretty much all gets imported from our eligibility and transition tab within the database. And these questions are the ones that either you guys fill out during the transition plan, or Tracy will go through and look for this information. The first question being permission to hold the transition conference. Again, this is a yes or no. Families do have the right to change their mind. So sometimes this is marked yes, and then later on a family changes their mind and is not wanting to meet, or vice versa. They're not wanting to meet and then they change their mind and do. So again, fluid document, like all of our documents in early intervention. But one of these two has to be checked when Tracy sends the URF. This right here, this is the, where this gets pulled from is your release of information. If the school district box is marked on the release of information, Tracy marks yes. If this were no, truthfully, we wouldn't even be able to send this to the school district. So that's why it's important that it gets filled in on the database side, because then that helps us be able to tie our loose ends. We don't want to send this to Part B unless a family has specifically said they want to share their information. This is also the question of, if a family says, no, I do not want the school district to get any information at all, and we cannot send the URF, this is what impacts our ability to continue services for a child when they're less than 90 days away from their birthday. So this, if you guys remember, sometimes we talk about, okay, if a family doesn't want to share any information with Part B, we have to stop services 91 days before their third birthday. So anytime you get a family that says that, my request is reach out to me so I can tell you guys exactly what to do. A family can say, yes, share my information with Part B, but I don't want to have the transition conference. That's fine. We can continue to see them then until their third birthday, as long as we can send this one-page form. But if we can't even send the one-page form, we have to stop services 91 days before, which is why if anything is ever different, right, about transition, I always want you guys to reach out to me. That way we can make sure we're honoring what the family's requests are while staying in federal compliance. Those two things often are very difficult to do at the same time, or so it feels. I see a chat in the chat box. Is there anything I need to know about, Jana?
Teresa's asking if the family changes their mind on the transition plan regarding meeting with the school, can we edit the existing document after the original transition plan and then document that in CompuClaim, or do we do a new transition plan?
Yes, great question, Teresa. KDHE's response is that the transition plan is a fluid document. So if something changes, yes, you can go into the original transition plan and update it. The only tricky part is anytime you do anything with the transition plan, that is considered an IFSP review. So you do need to make sure you're also doing the IFSP review consent form, so the parent is aware in signing consent that they know you're updating the plan. So you can't just like go in and edit it real quick. The family has to sign off on it as well. But you can just, again, import it and edit that original document, leaving the original date of the transition plan. Don't ever change dates for original meetings. Does that make sense? Or is it clear as mud? That's what my dad always said. It took me a long time to figure out what that meant when I was little. I didn't really get it, you know. The last question on this URF, which stands for Universal Referral Form, Universal Part C to Part B referral form, sorry, is this question we've recently been talking about, where the Department of Education about 6 or 7 years ago created this longitudinal data study. And they were, I'm using past tense, they were tracking data to look at services a child received from cradle to career, birth to 21. What has happened over the years is leadership at the state level has changed. This longitudinal data study has either ended or nobody knew about it, and it's not in effect anymore. So I feel like this is an instance where we're oversharing information and we don't need to be. And so I've let all the Part B transition coordinators know they're going to see a lot of no's checked on this particular question, because we're not going to be checking it on the release of information anymore. However, it doesn't impact Part B's ability because we have checked yes on question number 2. And that's the question. And really, this page is all KSDE wants. They only want the information for purposes of transition 2. So I've already given Part B a heads up. Shouldn't be a big deal, but if you hear any questions from them, again, let me know and I'll follow up. Or, again, you're welcome to share this information and CC me if you want to. But I have asked the Department of Health and Environment and KITS to kind of relook at this and relook at our database. And if it's in there and it doesn't need to be, can we adjust it and take it out? That will probably happen, I don't know, in the year 2040. So until then, just check no, because we don't need to be sharing cradle to career information with KSDE anymore. Questions about the URF?
Monica, I have one. Okay, so when filling out the ROI, then when we first get a kiddo, should we not have checked Kansas Department of Education? Because so just take that off.
I would just uncheck it. Yeah. And okay. I did send Bev some updated initial home visit red folder evaluation forms that I'll send to you guys as well. And that ROI is updated. So KSDE is not checked.
Okay.
Yeah, but you can just uncheck that. And then you guys don't have to worry about explaining that anymore either, because what we're saying to families isn't really even accurate information. Sorry.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Hey, Monica, along those lines, the Sound Beginnings box, that's the universal newborn hearing screening. They track those kids as well. What are your thoughts on that as far as sharing too much or too little? What would you like us to do with that?
So Sound Beginnings on the release of information. Let me see if I can pull up an ROI. Sound Beginnings is a, do you guys see the ROI right now? So Sound Beginnings is this box right here, which is the state newborn hearing screening program. If a child fails the newborn hearing screening in the hospital, Sound Beginnings is automatically notified of that. And then Sound Beginnings makes a referral to us. By the time all that's happened, we've actually usually gotten a referral already from the hospital. But we wouldn't share any information directly with Sound Beginnings unless the child had a permanent hearing loss. So that would be a question, is if a child does have a permanent hearing loss, you're going to check this Kansas State School for the Blind box, most likely, because you'll most likely have Aaron Schuweiler, Jill, the new SLP's name is Nicole, possibly Twyla. So we want to make sure that's getting checked on there. Unless you're going to be communicating directly with Sound Beginnings, you don't need to check that box because it's really more of a referral source. But because it's under the umbrella of KDHE, they actually can access our database kind of without our permission, which is part of being a state program. So I don't think you ever need to check that box unless maybe like if we're working with a child who's 2 that suddenly gets diagnosed with a permanent hearing loss, then we may want to add them on there. But again, a lot of this is because of the newborn hearing screening, so it shouldn't impact you guys at all. Okay, any other questions about kind of this? Think of the URF as the first, as step 1 in the transition process.
follow up to that, Stacy would like to know, should we check the sound beginnings box on the database?
If it's marked on the ROI as yes, I would also mark it in the database as yes. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the sound beginnings box is on the health information tab.
Yeah, I think what I was wondering about that that one page that has all of the different services that a family might already have. Sound Beginnings is on there, like if they have, you know, Medicaid or private health insurance or childcare or that page. You know which one I'm talking about?
Are you talking about on the IFSP itself?
Yeah.
That might be services or other services.
Other services. Yeah, that one.
Yeah, man, they have you guys checking stuff everywhere. Wouldn't it be nice if you checked it in one spot, it like auto-filled in another? That'd be lovely. Yeah, if they are a child that has permanent hearing loss, then probably that box should be checked also. Because they are most likely getting support and services from Sound Beginning. So this page here honestly is more of a documentation of what that family circle of support looks like outside of infant toddler. This page doesn't mean we're going to send information or not. It just is a way to kind of help parents realize, wow, I've got a lot more supports than maybe I thought. Or looking at it and saying, wow, all these things are available. Maybe I should be accessing a little bit more. So this isn't a permission to share. It's really just who's in my circle and who's helping our family, if that makes sense. So it's riveting information, I realize. I got to go back up to where I can see Jana, because if Jana laughs, then I know it was a good joke. I feel like kind of like my dad right now, you know, like he makes a joke and I'm like, oh my God, that wasn't funny. But I laugh anyway. Jana liked that one. Okay, so we're going to roll into the technically would be phase 2 of transition, which is the transition plan. Again, I'm going through these in a phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Sometimes these all happen at the same time because the child is 34 and a half months old and we have to do everything at once. So again, we realize there's different scenarios, but this is a Word document, kind of our transition plan template, same spots and same information in the database, just a Word document. The last couple years, Infant Toddler has chosen to have our transition documents, both our transition plan and our transition conference, as our area of focus as an agency when we're having our IFSP quality review. Hopefully I've said that over the last 2 years. If not, I apologize if I said it and you're like, oh yeah, I forgot. It probably just means that one of your IFSPs wasn't pulled to be audited, because I try and keep you guys updated with that. We'll kind of walk through. This is a document, which is an extremely long document for what I feel like sometimes is a somewhat short conversation, but talking about some gaps that we can possibly fill in, things that we can tighten up, looking at our past 2 years of quality reviews. The date, obviously, you guys are great about filling in that date. And again, this is where we wouldn't change this date if you did an update later on with something that the family changed their mind about. So always leave that original transition plan date in the database. This part right here is something that we've gotten some feedback on, that we could really work on being more individualized with the families about the family's priorities for the child's transition. And my question to you guys is, when you get to this point in the transition plan, what are you saying to families? How are you asking about this, and ways that you feel like some good success? Like, what are you saying to where you feel like you're getting some good responses from families?
Monica, it's Casey. I am stuffing my face, so I will not turn my video on.
Oh, sad.
But it is more difficult when it's like all at once, like you had said, because all the parent is thinking about is barely getting into our services. So I feel like I always say something along the lines of thinking about knowing that, Johnny will be maybe going into the school district for services, and knowing that our services are going to end. What do you hope for him to achieve as he goes into the school district? It always pretty much is the same. I've even had parents say like, well, I just want him to qualify and get services if he needs it. I feel like is the one I hear the most.
And I think that's a good one. And we're not going to be the gatekeepers of changing parents' wording. And I think if that's what they've shared, then that's absolutely okay to write. I think over the last year, we've gotten better at asking families this, and not just typing in family wants, blah, blah, blah. Family wants, to keep, get speech therapy, or, like there were lots of statements and priorities on here that were worded really, really similar. And I think some of that is because we've provided templates. And as therapists, we love templates because it kind of takes the guesswork out of stuff. But then sometimes I think that we get busy and we don't dive a little bit deeper. And so it doesn't look very individualized, which is really the whole point of having this conversation with every family going through transition. So I think that's a great one. I think, and like you said, Casey, especially, our SLPs and ECSEs, oftentimes you guys are starting to work with children, and it's already time to start talking about transition, because they are, right around that 2.5-year-old time frame, and we just don't have a lot of time with them. We know too that lots of times we're already talking about this throughout the course of maybe a year before the child's actually old enough to have a transition plan. If you look in this little tiny box right here, the transition plan date is no more than 9 months before a child turns 3, and no less than 90 days prior. So no more than 9 months or no fewer than 90 days. I can't believe I'm going to say this, but we tend to do them too early. And it's like the child is 9 months and 3 days, and we're technically out of compliance. So I'm going to show you guys a website also that you can use to figure out exactly what that date is. If you go into this is how I do it. I use it all the time, so it just kind of pops up. But if you type in date calculator, you'll come up with this time and date. I believe it's an app, but I don't like apps on my phone, so I don't put them on there, but you guys can put this time and date calculator on there. And the nice part is if you type in a child's birthday, say we have a kid who turns 3 on this date, and we want to subtract 9 months, we know that the transition plan can't be done before March 23rd of 2021. Again, this is where we tend to do them a couple days before, because it is an exact formula. This is also when I'll email you guys some important dates. If I want to know exactly 90 days before a child's birthday, I'll just subtract 90 days from the birthday. And again, 90-day timeline to do the transition conference is September 24th. So this is where really I don't even do the math. I have a program do it for me, but date calculator, I highly recommend getting, because that might help you guys just kind of manage some of that a little bit differently, but always reach out.
Monica, I have a question.
Yeah.
I thought when you first pull up a kiddo on the database that there, if you left click or right click on their name, that it pulls up, are those dates considered accurate, right? Can you go back to like if you were to search for a kiddo's name?
Yep. Like right here.
Our screen hasn't changed yet.
Oh, hold on. Thank you for letting me know. Is that better?
Yes, that, so you right clicked on there and those dates show up. Those are accurate, correct? That if we're after that 90-day date there.
Right. That would be for a transition conference. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, our date has to fall in between those two dates of the 90-day date and the 9-month date.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yes. That would be another way that you could do it easily. I didn't realize they had that 9-month date on there. That's the one that I feel like we get dinged on the most as we do transition plans a little tiny bit early.
Okay. Because usually like for me, it helps when I just put in initial IFSP. I just go ahead and find that 9-month or that 3-month out date, 90-day date, and go ahead and put it on the calendar and then set a reminder for at least a month or 5 weeks before. That's been really helpful for me.
Yeah.
So.
I would definitely use those dates because it's, each month has different days than the month before. And then there's February, which messes everybody up. Like it's really difficult, like rely on someone else doing the math for you because these programs will calculate all that in there. And I think that sometimes we say, oh, the kid turns 3 on November 1st. Well, 9 months before that is February 1st. But that's not exactly right, unfortunately. So again, yeah. So if you just click on any of these names for these kids and then right click, that'll give you who's got the FSC role as well as some of those initial dates that are super important to look at. Erica has an Excel sheet that calculates this for all the kids on her caseload if anyone would like that template. Ooh, Amy Wilcox is getting ousted in the Excel document department.
I love the data.
I love that you love the data. I think that that's fantastic. Okay, Erica will share that as well, which is super awesome too, because then everything is in one place. And I feel like that's the hardest part of the FSC role is just where is all this information and is it easily accessible for you guys? And then once you have it, do you know what to do with it? So awesome. I love that you guys have all these little things that you've created. Okay, so family priorities. Again, putting the family's words in there. If a family says to you, I don't know, just asking them, what do you, when so-and-so Johnny turns 3, what would you like for him to be doing? Where would you like for him to be at? And just, again, trying to get a little bit of information out of here. District department, you guys are doing, I think, a really nice job of filling this all in. I feel pretty lucky from year to year. This doesn't change a lot for our Part B partners. One of the more important things that Part B is asked is that we always put their work number here and not their cell phone. Like we all have Melissa Thomas's cell phone, right? But Melissa Thomas would prefer we put Olathe School District number in here. So that's something that we just try and be mindful of. That way we're kind of, following what the school district is wanting to do. The only school district that's had any change this year is DeSoto. They are bringing in Juanita Roberts, and Leslie is taking a different role, not a different position. I think they're just having Juanita take over the transition piece. So Juanita's name and email are really the only changes to our Part B partners this year. All right, so all of these A through J are tiny little important pieces to share with a family when you guys begin talking about transition. For the most part, you guys are always going to have your name and then the date that you talked about this with the family. Most of the time, this date matches this date up here. But again, it doesn't always have to match because ideally this is a fluid document, right? So we can edit it and morph it and change it. One of the pieces that I feel like is probably the most important that we understand and carefully explain to families is this line item number B. Because not every child that qualifies for our program is going to be eligible for Part B. And so this potentially eligible wording is federal wording that is used through the Office of Special Education and in IDEA. And it basically just means a child is qualified for birth to 3 early intervention services, and this child is someone who might be eligible. But because Part B has to do their own evaluation, gather their own information, and their eligibility criteria is very different than ours, it's really important that we don't indicate to a family that yes, a child's going to qualify or no, a child's not going to qualify. Really, we've got to just stay neutral as much as, sometimes that can be difficult because there have been instances where even children have had a diagnosis of autism, they have not qualified in Part B. So they don't have these automatic qualifiers that we do in Part C. They really look at how is the diagnosis, how is the delay impacting education? And if it's not, they don't have clinical judgment like we do. Like they just don't get to make those gray area judgments. So again, just because a child has a diagnosis does not mean they're going to qualify for an IEP in the district. And that can be, again, don't have to go into that much detail. But again, just kind of, sharing that information with families that that's a decision that the Part B team will make after they've gathered the evaluation information. Obviously, we've talked about this a little bit more, I feel like, but reviewing the family and child parent rights document, anytime you guys do an IFSP or review, truthfully, anytime a family signing a prior written notice, we need to be offering them a copy of their parent rights. Hey, I've got to offer this to you. You already have a copy. You got it in your red folder. Would you like another one? But that's something that, even if you just have a couple extra paper copies with you, just so you can flash it. If you include the link in an attachment that you send to the family, or, again, a PDF document, I think that we, again, that's something that we can tighten up a little bit, is just making sure we're offering the family, letting them know that document basically says, we can and won't do anything without their written permission. They're part of the team. We want their input, all that good stuff. A lot of you guys are listing, right here in line item D, other options that either the family's considering or maybe they're already involved in, whether it's a faith-based preschool, whether they're going to a daycare, in-home daycare, a child care center. So again, this is just a place to document some other resources that the family has once that child turns 3. When you guys if you have questions, let me know as we're going through these. This line item F, obviously Tracy is in charge of sending all of our URFs. And so always leave the date blank, because if you put a date in here, if you manually type a date in here, that pulls this child off Tracy's list to send a URF to. Tracy doesn't send it, the district doesn't get it, we're possibly out of compliance. So line F, leave that date blank, but if there's already a date in there, that means Tracy's already sent the URF and it's totally fine to leave it in there. And that might be something too, is once that URF gets sent, you might just want to share with the family that they're going to start hearing from Part B. Like Part B will send them basically a document that says, hey, we received your information. They call them procedural safeguards, but basically it's kind of their formal documentation. They've made contact with the family they've received a referral for. I think that it's 2 weeks that they have to make that contact within 2 weeks. Don't quote me on that, but it's a pretty quick turnaround. So as we're sending all these URFs, they're also sending out, hey, we got your information, you know, kind of a welcome to potentially part B. Here's what's going to happen next. But then nothing happens for a couple months until we have that transition conference. So again, just giving the family a little bit of a heads up. If they hear from part B, you know, that's just sort of an introduction for all intent and purposes.
And Monica, if Tracy's name's not in there, should we leave that? She said, let's see, leave that blank as well.
You could go ahead and type Tracy's name in there. Yep, that's totally fine. Because Tracy not only documents, you know, and sends these, she'll actually put a non-billable log into CompuClaim for all the children that she sends these on. Again, that way we've got that documentation in addition to having the PDF form in the child's folder. So here, again, you see these 3 questions you guys are now used to, which are on the URF, right? They're on the eligibility and transition tab. They're also in the transition plan. But this is where, based on that conversation with the family, if they want to hold the conference, yes or no, again, are they okay with sharing the information with Part B? And all the information that Part B would get is that URF, which is pretty much demographics, child's name, date of birth, address, mom and dad's name, and phone number. And then on question number 3, again, this would be this cradle to career that's no longer relevant. So you can always just mark 3 or mark 3 on that, mark no on that, and just let the family know that they're no longer tracking the study and it's, you know, not an impact. Target date for the conference is just a guesstimate, doesn't hold you to anything, but basically just gives the family a heads up. Hey, my kid turns 3 in July. We're going to aim to have the transition conference done in March. So again, they're kind of just, so it's maybe not the first time they've heard it. Line H, the records transfer, that would be the IFSP, the most recent IFSP, and the release of information. I do realize it says evaluation and assessments. We are not providing Part B with our assessment protocol, which is the AEPS. If there's a special instance where Part B is going to have a really hard time getting a eval done, we'll deal with those on an individual basis. Last summer, we were doing this a lot because of COVID. We are not doing this at this time. The evaluation information will be included in the IFSP and the My Child Story because you guys do a nice job of including the routines and then also what the developmental skills look like within those routines. And then this is just kind of a document of, hey, when it's time to do the IEP meeting. Oh, I see a question pop up.
Says, does question number 3 relate to giving permission to transfer record?
No. Question number 3 is specifically cradle to career, which is no longer a thing. Question 2 is what gives permission to share the IFSP for purposes of transition.
And yep. Luke had a follow-up. Ideally, target date for conference should be marked as
4 months. I mean, 90 days is obviously our deadline, but I would always try and do a 4-month before the child turns 3. That way you've got a month of potential cancellations and scheduling if something were to happen. Line item I, again, just documenting, you know, that the family has a right to invite anyone they want to the IEP meeting. It doesn't mean they're going to come. It just means that the family can invite anybody they want. When I was doing coordination, because the families always would kind of look at me funny, and I would say, like, for example, like, you can invite grandma and grandpa, or you can invite, you know, that was when President Obama was president. You can invite President Obama. Doesn't mean he's going to show up, but again, you've got the right to invite anybody that you want to this meeting, including me, if you would like me to also be there. And so then that just is, again, a documentation, ideally, that we know who the family's wanting to invite. And you know, again, putting someone down here doesn't mean they have to come or they don't have to come. Just trying to get the family really to think about, you know, who they want, for lack of a better word, on their side of the table. Like, who do they want as an advocate and support for them? And then line item J is really if the family just says, no, I don't want the transition conference. This is where we would document, okay, what's their plan for when the child turns 3? Is it going to be daycare? Is it private therapy? Do parents just want to take a break? And if the family wants to hold the transition conference meeting, you can just write down here, NA, family will agrees to hold the transition conference meeting. So again, just a documentation in place for, we can basically say, okay, the family doesn't want to move forward with Part B. What do they have in place so we're not leaving them without a plan? And this might be one of those things that like Teresa had asked earlier, maybe they don't want to, they know they don't want to have the transition conference, but 6 months before the kiddo turns 3, they don't know what they're going to do. So this might be something that gets updated again, if you guys think about it. And if not, then just know you've completed it as to best of your ability, and that's the most important thing. Questions about the transition plan? We've got just a couple minutes. I know, I don't know if Leslie, I haven't heard the ding dong of the bell yet, you know, I don't know, I might call it the popular bell. So we're just going to roll into this because we know Leslie and Juanita will be jumping on, and I do want you guys to have a chance to not only hear from them, but talk with them. We can always do Q&A later. Again, this template directly off the database, just a Word document that allows you guys to do some cutting and pasting, which is my favorite function. So transition conference date, the lovely part is when you fill this in on the database within the IFSP, it fills in on the database as well. You guys can kind of, you know what this looks like. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about this. I feel like you guys do a great job of including the information on here. The only thing is this line item A, we just need to be sure we're including information the family's sharing about their child, about their family, you know, kind of what that development looks like. So this is kind of our documentation of when you say to a family, well, you know, tell Leslie a little bit about your child, tell Kim a little bit about, you know, your son. This is just where, you know, your fine skills as a note taker come into play. Ironically, the other thing we've gotten downgraded on is right next to it, there's actually a box, and you're supposed to write mom's name or mom or something. I actually didn't even realize that because right above it, it says parent or guardian. So I just assumed that was, we didn't have to write anything, but I guess we do. So again, mom, dad, grandma, early intervention parent, again, whatever that looks like. But all of this template information on here has actually been kind of compiled with different Part B's input. So we're trying to be as general as we can for the 6 different school districts, but then encouraging you guys, we've added some asterisks in here that just talk about, you know, this is where you would document specific information shared by the district on timelines. So there's a couple places in here we want you guys to edit the document, again, to individualize it for the family, the situation, and the timelines that are coming up. believe, hold on, I'm going to look real quick. I believe Leslie and Juanita have jumped on.
While you're looking, there's a quick question on the 90-day timeline. Is the 90-day timeline the requirement for sending the URF and holding the transition plan, or is it also the timeline for the transition conference to be held as well?
All three. The 90-day timeline is technically our timeline to send the URF, to hold the transition plan, and to complete the transition conference. Like, that's our last possible day to be in compliance. Now, if we get a referral that's late, right, and the child's like 72 days away from their birthday, that's when we use our late reasons that a child was found eligible less than 90 days, and then we're not out of compliance. So there's certain times where we just can't meet those timelines because of referral dates. However, the sending of the URF is one that Johnson County was out of compliance for probably about 8-9 years. The family service coordinators used to send their own URFs, and life gets busy and people forget, and then it's too late. So that's why we've just streamlined it to having one person do it, because she's just monitoring that all of the time. We probably send, I don't know if Tracy's on here, I would say we send 500 to 600 URFs a year. And so it's a big job every month. And it's also a big job to monitor, which families don't want their information sent, and, which ones like are on hold because they might exit, like there's all these different moving pieces in there. So that would be, and another reason why we don't want you guys filling in that transition plan line with Tracy's line, because again, we want that date to be blank so that that child continues to pop up on her list so she can monitor that.
Thank you for that, Monica. Looks like Leslie's on.
Hi guys, thanks for having us.
Hey Leslie, how are you?
I am doing wonderful. It's so weird seeing all of you, like not in our usual context, but all together. You're a whole big group.
We are.
Well, I just want to introduce really quick too. So Juanita Roberts this year, I think some of you know, and I know some of you guys, we don't work with so much just because of where our district is. So she is awesome. And she's going to be taking over my old role as the early childhood specialist. And so she and I will be on a lot of meetings together initially as we just kind of learn the process. And you're always welcome to still, contact any of us if you have questions, but I just want you to have her face too. So she is a wealth of information, has a ton of experience as an ECSE. So she is awesome. So, and I'll still be in the district as a social worker. So I'm sure our paths will cross in those ways as well. So Juanita's on here also. So Miss Monica, do you have questions or how do you want me to do it?
Yeah, we just kind of went through like our 3 parts of transition, and, our transition conference document was the one that I had just pulled up and kind of walked through. But, really what I'd like you to at least start off with, and then staff can ask questions if you guys are comfortable with that, is just, from your vantage point, how does this process feel? What works well? Kind of what happens? Like, after we, because we know what happens up until, but sometimes we don't know what happens after when a child doesn't qualify, and just all these different moving parts for Part B, if you don't mind, again, sharing obviously DeSoto specific, but also Part B in general.
Absolutely. We would be glad to. So it all kind of starts, we have, and I don't know if all of you have CBER or if that's just something Monica gets to have the joy of experiencing. So it's like a 1970s computer website, I feel like, where essentially names get popped up and we accept them. So they're a way to refer kiddos our way. So we keep that in our mind about, okay, these are going to be the upcoming kids. And then we also get the URF from Tracy. And so that's sort of the signal on our end that a transition meeting should be happening soon. And then we typically get the IFSP from the provider. Sometimes I know there have been times where it's the initial IFSP at the transition conference. And so sometimes we're all kind of walking in not knowing too much about the student. So after that, we have the transition meeting where we get to learn a lot about the kiddo. And it's always helpful, I feel like, to just really quickly kind of get an update on those IFSP goals and just hear about any progress that you've made with them. So we're up to date on how the child's functioning in all their different areas. And then after that meeting, I know every district does do it differently, but typically Juanita or I would have continued follow up with the parent as far as getting enrollment done, which honestly can surprisingly be a bit of a struggle. I would say that getting them enrolled in the school district is maybe not something that's always on their mind, especially if it's for an evaluation. In DeSoto, we have to have the child enrolled just because we have to keep track of them, if they're coming in our building. So we have to go through the whole birth certificate, shot records, all that stuff. And then we work on getting consent for the evaluation. Our district, and again, everyone does it differently. I would say the 5 years that I've been doing this role, or the 4 years, we pretty much always get the evaluation done by the third birthday. Like, we don't want to have any ifs, ands, or buts. So even if it's a late referral, even if their birthday's like in a couple of weeks, for our comfort level and just trying to make sure that we're following all the rules and not having anything happen on our end, we will try to get it done. And so the evaluation can look differently depending on the child's needs and also the timeline. Often, if it's just more of like an articulation concern, then in DeSoto, we will typically do an evaluation by appointment or itinerantly. So our speech pathologist will schedule a time for that child to come in and they'll do the evaluation probably in 1 or 2 sessions. And those are typically not too complicated, I would say. And then we'll have the meeting shortly before, probably a week before the third birthday, to determine eligibility and any services. For some of the more complicated situations where we feel like they have multiple areas of need, we typically recommend doing what we call in our district a classroom-based evaluation, where the child actually comes in and participates in one of our preschool classrooms. In our current setup, it would be Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday in the morning. And so they join a classroom. We see them over a period of time. So they're attending just like any other student, and we're able to get to see them in a classroom routine and really start to see any kind of social concerns. How are they doing with transitions? We can take a really close look at all areas of concern. And then again, we would have the evaluation meeting about a week before they turn 3 and make those decisions about eligibility in any services. And so it's kind of like transition meeting, enrollment, and consent. So acquiring parent consent to do the evaluation. And then starting out getting set up with, like, if they need busing or those types of things, and then just getting them here so we can gather our information. We do the AEPS, which I know you're all familiar with, and some districts do things differently. I can tell you, for our kind of speech only kids, we still have the parent fill out the complete AEPS. We just want to make sure we're not missing any other areas of concern. And typically there aren't any, but it's always good to we check that box also. And then if a student doesn't qualify, that's always kind of a tricky situation, I would say. So it's rare that we would bring a kiddo in for a classroom evaluation and they wouldn't qualify. I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but often if they've been receiving infant toddler services, they have multiple areas of need. Typically, if they typically would end up qualifying. There's maybe a couple of exceptions. And so then they would just continue to stay in our preschool and attend those days and receive any special education services while they're attending the preschool. If we have a student, though, who does not qualify, there's a couple of different things that we look at doing. Sometimes they just return back to where they would normally be, which might be home or daycare or whatever their natural setting is. So they would stop attending with us and they would just continue to attend home or daycare or wherever they might be. There are some opportunities for fee-based or peer spots, at least in our school district. The only issue is the age. So for our requirements, they would have to have turned 3, like, it's kind of, I'm getting into a lot of specifics here, but basically there are times where, because of when their birthday is, since we're dealing with such young kids who are transitioning, like if they just turned 3 and it's, let's say, December, then we wouldn't look at them being a potential peer or a fee-based student until the following August, where they would be starting like their 3-year-old year. So that's a little confusing. And I would say that in the rare cases that happens, parents can be disappointed because they've been attending preschool, they've been getting evaluated. We decide that they don't need services. And then they're kind of like, well, you know, we liked coming to you, and, you know, now what do we do? So again, those are exceptions. I wouldn't say it happens frequently. And then for our kiddos who are just getting speech evaluation, we have a speech therapist here who just has an itinerant caseload. So she will see them by appointment, and they wouldn't necessarily be in a classroom setting. We do have some speech kids who are in the classroom, but for the most part, if we're working on articulation or something like that, you're going to look at more of like an appointment based. I know a common question that we've talked about before, just because of Medicaid billing and things, at least in our district, our first date of service will always be their 3rd birthday. So you don't have to worry about that overlap. Even if we have the meeting prior, usually we have our meeting like a week before they turn 3. The formal service start date for us won't be until that 3rd birthday. And we have been trying to kind of keep you guys, I'm going to be honest, it doesn't always happen, but we've been trying to keep you guys informed if you don't come to the meeting, but just sort of let you know the results, just so you know if you're working with a family, if, hey, they qualified, or no, they didn't qualify. So that's something that I think on our end, we continue to try to work on to make happen. So I will say though, I do know we do things a little bit differently than some of the other districts. And so there have definitely been times where we'll do a classroom evaluation by appointment if we need to. So that would just be where our whole evaluation team will see the student in like an appointment setting. So we have to be flexible. It's not always set in stone. So Juanita always tells me I'm wordy, but I feel like that was not that bad. That was a lot. Okay. So questions, anything I didn't talk about, you all just tell me.
I might jump in real quick too and just say, you know, thanks for us coming to eligibility and IEP meetings is something that we're trying to do. So that's kind of a new process as we're getting going, and appreciate you guys inviting us to those meetings. And also too, that follow-up is important just for infant toddler staff, because if a child qualifies for Part B and has an IEP, we do have to exit them the day before their birthday. But if they don't qualify for Part B, the exit date is their actual 3rd birth date. So that's why it's really important for database purposes that we're finding out whether or not they're Part B eligible, because that does impact not only our database exit date, but also the database exit reason. And, you know, it's great to have accurate data.
That's awesome to know. And I didn't realize that. So good to know. We all have our own kind of rules that we have to hold to. And, you know, speaking of that, I'm just thinking of a couple of things that we sort of have to work with you guys on a case-by-case basis. Sometimes we'll get a URF, and so the child's been referred to us, but then after that, we get like an email where the caseworker, case manager, or service provider says, oh, actually, we dismissed them, which is totally fine. I just want you guys to know when you're talking to the families, at least for our district, we'll still contact that family, because for our records, so we don't get in trouble, we have to have offered the evaluation and get them to decline it. So I just want to make sure we're clear on that, because I know sometimes it might seem like overkill, like leave these people alone, but we just have to do that. That's another one of the things that on our end to make sure we're keeping the state happy.
Yes, we're in charge, but not really.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
We play by the state's rules for sure. And I feel like the only other thing that I was thinking about that sometimes comes up or sometimes doesn't come up, we've had some families who may say at the transition conference, they'll decline the evaluation. And then let's say a month later or a couple of weeks later, even decide that they want to do the evaluation. And so in those cases, that's completely fine and we'll do it, and we're not held then to the third birthday. And so just making sure if you're working with families that as you work with them, they say, oh, I changed my mind, I'm going to do it. Just making sure that they're aware that we're still going to do the eval, but that third birthday rule, although we may try to follow, we may try to get it done, that's when the 60 school days will kick in as opposed to the third birthday.
Yes, those are, and that's how Part B does it, all the Part B programs. So, again, if a child is exited from Part C, but we've already made that referral, all of the school districts have to follow up and offer that Part B evaluation for the parent either to go through or to decline. And then, yeah, that piece of it looks the same.
Okay.
So, yeah. We did have one of our providers, Elise, ask, so on our transition plan document, there's actually a place where the parent lists who they want invited to the IEP, and we write that down. And Elise is asking if Part B sees this, and does that prompt you guys to invite them? And I was just going to go ahead and say no, that you guys probably aren't necessarily looking at that document. At all, would be my guess. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I could be wrong. But my guess is you're probably looking through the IFSP more to look at the outcomes, the services, and probably reading that My Child story.
Yes.
So again, I feel like as we've wanted to be invited to the Part B eligibility and potential IEP meetings, like, again, that communication of, who do we reach out to if we haven't gotten that, at least in DeSoto? Who would that be Juanita? We just say, hey, wondering
Yes.
what this is. Okay.
Yes. I would say contact Juanita, and we'll also at our staff meeting make another plug just to kind of remind everybody, hey, if it's infant toddler referral, we want to make sure we're inviting the infant toddler folks. But change is that I wouldn't expect overnight that you'll be 100% getting that, but we'll work on that mindset for sure.
Yeah, we went probably a good 4 years without being there. So I feel like it might take 4 years for us to get back,
Yes.
that we can't expect it to change. And then with new staff that you guys have, like, it's a constant learning process. So again, we appreciate you guys being able to follow up with us on when those meetings are, so we can be there when we can. It just helps. Then there's, that follow-up it's a little bit easier on the back end.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And you're right. Honestly, we really focus on the IFSP, like to learn about the student. I know we have a lot of paperwork too, that we probably send to people. That's kind of not something that, we look at goals, services, and their story mostly. So yeah, I would not notice on the transition paperwork. I'm sorry.
Yep. No, I assumed, although I know you guys think it's riveting. I just feel like maybe from time to time you've missed that. So
Yeah.
yeah, and that's one of those things too, not only Elise, but as we've talked about that, there's so much information in that document. And so again, it's, that would be just the one thing to always, encourage the parent to advocate. Hey, did you invite our infant toddler therapist, when they're scheduling that meeting? And I think as much as we can encourage the parents to advocate for themselves and for the child, that just helps them moving forward to be able to continue to do that. So, again, if we all are just reminding everybody, I feel like we'll get the invites more than not.
And I thought of this as completely off what we were talking about, but one other difference I think from infant toddler and then for us in Part B that maybe parents could be prepped on, at least for us, as far as getting consent to do a special education evaluation, we have to have whoever has parental rights and who has ever either, if somebody has been assigned to be an educational advocate, they can sign. And so I know with infant toddler, I don't want to misspeak, but I think that maybe they can, I don't know if you have to track down the biological parent or not, or what the rules are, but from our lens for special education, there's been a couple times where maybe we'll have a foster parent is at the transition meeting, but then we have to say, hey, if biological parent still has their parental rights, we need to have that person be able to sign the document. And so if you get a situation that where maybe it's not your typical family, that might just be something to be aware of. It's typically gone pretty well, and I don't think we've had a lot of pushback, but that is always something for us at the school district to kind of have to introduce, that for any kind of special education paperwork, we'll have to have whoever has the parental rights, or if they've been terminated, if an educational advocate's been assigned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that does look different. We have a much grayer area we can lean into and have the foster parent sign as
Yes.
the early intervention parent. KDHE made that delineation and distinguishment several years ago, which is lovely, but then does look different because Part B is managed by the Department of Ed. So even though our programs are offering special education, we're managed by different state programs, and they all have different rules. So yeah, that's a really good piece to know. Again, and if we forget to share that, again, just please feel comfortable
Yes.
reaching out.
Absolutely.
And Monica, I just have a question. As far as to email you guys to let you know, I know like Leslie had said that we email like the family service coordinators on the results of their evaluation, but do I let somebody in the office know that is in charge of?
No,
Okay.
yeah, the coordinators all manage their own kind of caseloads and including
Okay.
information in the database. So
Okay.
yeah, one content, it's a one-shop stop over here. And if it's
Okay. Okay.
Any other questions you guys can think of?
I've got a quick one for you. Just as you guys are receiving our documentation, are you feeling like you're getting enough information in our the My Child stories, or anything you would like to see us doing more of?
I appreciate the question. That's awesome. Thank you. I have to say, I feel like I would always say the more information, the better. And we recognize though that sometimes you might have just gotten this kid, or have seen them one time. But again, I always feel like the more the better. I certainly feel like most of the ones that we've gotten, I have a good feel for the child and kind of a good feel for what's going on. When we do have one of the instances where I feel a little bit maybe less sure of what we're going to be getting, sometimes you do the 6-month review at the same time as a transition meeting, which is totally fine because it's a good time to go over all the goals and everything. But I'll just let you know, like coming into that meeting, then we'll have, sometimes I feel like we have not as firm of a handle on how they've been progressing, understandably, because you're doing the progress review at that time. So some of our questions might seem, weird, but it's just based off of the most recent information that we've been given. Hearing and vision, always good. We always want to make sure, if you have something on there, and I always want to put a plug in. Our audiologist here is awesome, and she actually is getting a sound booth in our new building. And so we've been trying, as you guys have contacted us, I know your hearing screenings can fill up. So if you have somebody, who's 2.5, that you're really wanting to get a hearing screening done by the audiologist, just contact Juanita and we can try to fit them in during a child find screening day to make sure that we can get that covered. Because of course with our, speechies or the speech kiddos, we want to make sure they can hear. So.
Yeah, we love that because we have a couple audiology screening clinics that are like full for months and months and months.
That's what I heard. Yes.
Yeah.
So we will do our best.
When we can access other resources that help families get that done sooner, we love that too. So thank you.
Yes, of course.
And on the URFs, I know it's probably just like a already set form, but is there any way to add like the parents' email address?
Oh, Juanita.
So I've asked KDHE about 7 times over the last 3 years, and they tell me literally, and I quote, we have more important things to be working on right now. So, yeah. So that would be lovely.
It's just nice because, our legal stuff is that you have to send them their parent rights, and the parent rights are so long and they're really riveting information. And so I just thought, well, that would be easier to send it. I mean, I always send it later, but
yeah, I'll
Yeah.
ask again. I'll just say, hey, we had another request. It seems
Yeah.
to me an easy thing to do, but apparently that's not their interpretation. So, but I will
Gotcha.
certainly put another plug in for Part B. I know that
Yeah,
that would be
thank
lovely.
you. Juanita,
Thank
I
you.
didn't mean to laugh. It's just we always ask Monica this, all of us, all the
Oh,
time. It's-
so sorry.
no, it's
It's
a
a common theme. Mhm.
yes.
Yeah.
No, I feel like that's a reasonable. I know, you have no control over it, Monica, but it helps us too if we have to track them down. Like sometimes, just to try to get that decline ever. And usually, I can just contact you guys and you give us an email. But
Yeah. Be nice to have it in one place.
yeah.
Mhm. Nope, I get that.
Anything else? It's so weird on Zoom.
I
just like-
know. So you have to give like enough pause time to
They-
make people uncomfortable so they, know that it's their turn to ask a question.
Yes. And
Um,
I will say, you guys, like we are a smaller district. And so please, 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 if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ever email or contact us. And like you'll know for sure you'll get either of us so we can try to help answer any questions you have, or if you have a weird situation, because we want to work, we want to play nice and make your jobs as easy as possible. And I know you guys do the same for us. So
yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys for jumping in short notice and being able to join us. It's nice just hearing from our Part B partners, and not having, tiny little conversations in and out of houses too. So
Yes.
appreciate that.
no, absolutely, absolutely. And you guys are all awesome. And I miss seeing so many of you in person. So it was good to see you on Zoom.
Thanks, Leslie. Thanks, Juanita.
Thanks, Monica. We'll see you all later.
Bye.
Okay, bye. All right. The last thing I'm going to pop up for those of you that can stay on is just the prior written notice, because there's just one box I want to make sure we're checking if we're doing the transition conference. So during if you're doing a transition plan, obviously you mark this, but when you're doing a conference, be sure to mark you're having the transition conference. Be sure to mark whether it's the initial or the annual, annual, or it's just a regular review. And then during a transition conference, always mark this meeting to discuss exiting your child from services. This box is the box that then basically documents that we're exiting the child. And then we don't have to do an exit IFSP review when they turn 3, because we've already documented that we've discussed exiting with the upcoming transition. So anytime you check transition conference, be sure to discuss exiting from kids, and then the corresponding type of IFSP you're doing, initial, annual, or review. That is all I have, and it is 1:28. I'm happy to answer questions if you have them. For those of you that popped on, thank you. I know we don't spend a lot of time going through the IFSP paperwork, but I really want to do that so you guys feel more confident in what you're doing. And this was a question I had been getting a lot, so I just felt like it might be a good place to start with IFSP document review.
Hey, Monica, this is Meredith. Really quick, the transition plan, I believe it was the third question, the one about the cradle to career that you said is no longer a thing. Did you say to check no on that? Or I think I just always put yes, yes, yes on those 3 questions. But did you say put no on that, or what do we do with that one?
Yeah. If you put yes, nothing's going to go to KSDE because no one's gathering the data. So you might as well just put no. Again, just showing parents that we're protecting their information a little bit more. So yeah, number 3 can always be no. And if you mark yes, that's okay. I mean, that's not wrong. Just know that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, people are dropping like flies, so I'm gonna stop the recording and everybody have a fantastic weekend and we'll see you guys next week.